Wind. I'm the Chief Content Officer for the Independent Book Publishers Association. I'm really glad you're joining us because this is Contested Classics. Book banning isn't new. And I want to thank Every Library Institute who are giving us the opportunity to be part of their Banned Books Week 2025 observance by doing this recording. And we're joined by Dr. Michelle Parrinello-Cason and Dr. Amanda Barton. And hopefully I said your name correctly.
You did.
Fantastic. So I just want to say a tiny bit more about me. I'm coming at this from two perspectives. I work for this nonprofit, the Independent Book Publishers Association. And as part of that, I co-founded this program called We Are Stronger Than Censorship. That's the shirt I'm wearing. I'll talk a little bit more about it later. But basically, we buy and donate 2 books to offset every 1 book challenge, trying to make the numbers work against the book banners, so they slow down and don't, because it ends up it's not really about the books. They're trying to create this chilling effect. And I was really excited because I got to meet the publisher, Broad Books Press, Jen and Vanessa, who are working on this series of contested classics. And so Michelle and Amanda are the editors of those classics. And let's do introductions from them. So how about Michelle, can you give us a brief intro about you?
Sure. Yes, I am Michelle Parrinello-Cason, and I was so excited to get a chance to work on this project. Jen, Amanda, and I actually all know each other from graduate school, where we were all
Mhm.
working on our PhDs in English at the same time. And Jen approached me with an opportunity to work on this, and I jumped on it right away.
Mhm.
Since finishing my PhD, I was a full-time college professor for about 6 years, and I now run my own platform to deliver um, English classes, both literature and composition, to middle and high school students in the secular homeschool community. So I have a lot of opportunity to talk about books with young people and to choose books to put in front of them. And so this is a topic that's very close to my heart and something that has a real life impact on the work that I do.
Awesome, thank you. And Amanda, tell us a little about you.
So like Michelle said, I knew Jen and Michelle from our PhD program. Since finishing my PhD, I've had a lot of opportunity to teach college classes. So I've taught a lot of writing classes and women and gender studies classes. And now I've moved into student support. So I actually work in a program at St. Louis University called RISE, and we work with first generation students, minoritized students, and Pell Grant recipients. I still teach. I also teach in the core, so which has actually given me a chance to teach a little bit more of what I love and research. But I'm really endlessly fascinated by what people get uncomfortable with. And so when Jen sent me when Jen sent me this opportunity, even though I technically have a full-time job, I was like, no, I want to be a part of this, please. And she was like, yeah, if you only want to do one, that's fine. And I was like, no, please give me all 3. Thank you.
So just for me to be clear, the selection. So Michelle, what were tell us the 3 books that you did?
So I did The Great Gatsby, Tom Sawyer, and Mrs. Dalloway.
And Amanda?
And I did Frankenstein, The Picture of Dorian Gray, and Heart of Darkness.
So, and did you get to choose which ones you were doing, or like how did that work? Or did you thumb wrestle for them?
I kind of have an American literature background, so I tended towards the American authors. I do feel like we might have a squabble over the next set, so we're gonna have to
Okay.
flip some coins, I think.
Okay. I'm really interested then, because Jen hasn't told me the next set yet. She just let me know that we're talking about 2026. Yeah, and I have a Brit-Lit background, so my focus is actually the Middle Ages. But yeah, she approached me second. So when I saw what Michelle was doing, I was like, oh, I totally see why Michelle picked those.
That's cool. So For those who are watching this and maybe haven't been in junior high for a while, or those that just have never read them, can we do quick pitches for each of the books just to remind us what they're about, and then we can have a conversation about like, well, why were they contested in the first place? So why don't we do Great Gatsby first?
So, The Great Gatsby is a book by F. Scott Fitzgerald that is set in the 1920s. And it is really a look at this extremely wealthy individual. You might be familiar with the Leonardo DiCaprio version, where he's covered himself in elaborate clothing and throwing these lavish parties. I think that's what people think most of when they hear Great Gatsby, is the excess. And it certainly is dripping with it, but it is a commentary on the American dream and kind of wealth inequality, and what it means if somebody who was told that they weren't wealthy enough to access this life finds a way in, but is still rejected by the people who are in it. And it has been challenged because of its kind of casual portrayal of alcohol use. It has also been challenged as just being kind of amoral and not having a moral center. But if you ask me, I think it's mostly challenged because it lays bare how some American ideals are maybe not actually as strong of pillars as some of the people reading it think that they are.
Wow, that's fascinating. Thank you. Amanda, tell us about Frankenstein.
So Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, who was a teenager at the time that she wrote it, came out in 1818. I'm actually really excited because Guillermo del Toro's version is coming out on Netflix very, very soon. It looks amazing, but we can talk about that later. So Frankenstein is the story of a young man who goes off to college from Geneva, and he goes to college in Germany, and he gives life to a creature he makes out of different parts of dead human bodies. And then it is a tale of revenge and betrayal and justice when he realizes what a horrible thing he thinks he created, and he abandons it. And then that creature is rejected when it seeks out he seeks out human contact, and it becomes this like finally a chase across the Arctic as Victor Frankenstein's life has been destroyed by the creature he created and then abandoned. And it has been challenged. It has been challenged for violence, for very graphic violence. The murder of a child is depicted in it, and just the creation of the monster is pretty morbid. There's also a lot about like hubris in science and blasphemy that actually comes out of it. There are a lot of metaphors about creation and godlikeness. And then at the time that it came out, it was actually very politically radical as well. And a lot of the reviews that came out then criticized it specifically for its politics.
Huh, I didn't know that. That's
Mm-hmm.
fascinating.
Yeah,
All right.
that was a lot of fun.
So Michelle, Tom Sawyer.
So Tom Sawyer is written by Mark Twain. It is set just up the river from my hometown of Ellsbury, Missouri, and Hannibal, Missouri, even though it has a fictionalized name in the book. And I picked it from the list. It was the first one I picked because I had just finished teaching Huck Finn and James as a pair of books in one of my classes. And I was like, oh yeah, I've been reading this. I'll take Tom Sawyer. And I remember not being super impressed with Tom Sawyer when I read it as a teenager, just feeling like it was a bunch of vignettes of a troubled kid who's always trying to pull one over on somebody in his life. But once I read it after having taught Huck Finn and knowing that this was kind of the precursor to Huck Finn, I really saw it as a much more deliberate look at where kids get their lessons in life and how much hypocrisy there is from what they're told to do and how the adults around them behave. And also just what it is like to kind of search for some morality in a world where you're getting all these mixed messages. And I think that it's been challenged because, well, one, Tom Sawyer is just full of mischief. So it's like a handbook for how to cause trouble. But it is probably primarily been challenged because it has a lot of very deeply critical things to say about the church, a little bit about school and local government, but it is scathing about the church and religious education. Though I would not say necessarily the Christian religion itself. I think it's mostly about the institutions and the hypocrisy of adults using biblical references to tell children what to do, but not upholding them in their own lives. And I very much enjoyed working on it. Annotating it in this context made me appreciate it so much more than I had when I read it just as a, teenage reader.
And then I just have to say that Handbook for How to Cause Trouble should have been its subtitle because that's pretty fantastic.
Yep.
And actually, I'm just going to interject here because I was going to talk about it later, but you just brought it up. These are really heavily annotated editions. That just for people to know, it's not just the text. There's alongside the text, there is like commentary, and it feels very modern because you use sort of hashtags for organizing things, and then sections of the texts are highlighted to sort of let you know what there's commentary on, and you can choose to read it or not. So it's really robust. I was very impressed with it, and I think it's really cool. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that later. Okay, Picture of Dorian Gray, Amanda.
So The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This came out at the end of the 19th century. So it is like full of decadence and fin de siècle, I don't know, like ennui and skepticism. And it's the story of a young man in London society who basically makes a wish that a portrait that a friend painted for him could age, so he could not. And his wish comes true. So the portrait takes on all of his sins and ages for him, and he stays forever young and unblemished. And he falls into this like decadent, sinful lifestyle that like finally ends up in him murdering the painter of the portrait. And it's like it has been challenged for morality, and it has also been challenged because there is a lot of homoeroticism in it that is very clear throughout. Like it starts first page if you know what you're looking for, and so a lot of my annotations focus on that. And it was actually used, like passages of it were actually used in a libel trial that Oscar Wilde brought against somebody who accused him of sodomy. And he lost that. He lost that trial and then ended up being charged with gross indecency, based a lot on this book. And so, I mean, for me, this book is a pretty interesting example of like what we can say in literature and how it can be used against us. But it's got some wonderful commentary on on just sort of pleasure and decadence, and like what are the limits of pleasure and what's sort of like what's ethical and what's not, and sort of the limits thereof. It's also kind of beautiful in places.
Thank you. All right, Michelle, Mrs. Dalloway.
Mrs. Dalloway is not one of my American texts. It is by British author Virginia Woolf. And I can sum up the plot of Mrs. Dalloway real quick. A woman in London in high society wants to throw a party. She walks to the store, buys some flowers, comes back, prepares for her party. And while her party is happening, a man she doesn't know dies by suicide nearby. That's the entire plot. Which you might be like, well, then how did that make it into an entire novel? And it is extremely interior. It is about the meandering thoughts of this woman and the very rich social tapestry that she's weaving. It also uses stream of consciousness, so it jumps from mind to mind as you're reading it. And you don't always know which character's mind you're in right away. So it is kind of just technically difficult to read in many ways, especially for, I would say, modern readers who aren't used to reading extremely carefully, who are maybe used to more signposting in the works that they read that help them, like, oh, here's a transition. This does not have that. It requires a lot of cognitive work to just understand what you're reading. Um, it is a very quiet reflection on like regret and the paths that we choose in life and what we give up every time we make a choice. It's deeply moving. It is a very meaningful reflection on mental illness and the treatment of mental illness and the stigma surrounding it in ways that I found as I was annotating it for this almost hauntingly familiar to modern day conversations about mental illness. Feel like we should have maybe made some more progress than we have on that front. It's been challenged for those reasons. It's been challenged for the portrayal of mental illness. It has been challenged for its, in some ways, it's not even so much a banning it, but just like this is too hard for high schoolers to read. Like just kind of it's not worth the work that it takes to get through it is one of the reasons that it has been taken off a lot of lists of like they're like, well, why make them work this hard to understand something? And it has also been challenged for its portrayal of homosexuality between the protagonist and another woman when they were younger, and in a way that was more direct than I remembered. It's not graphic, but it is very direct for especially for the time that it was written in.
Cool. And then Amanda, Heart of Darkness.
Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, the Polish-British writer. This also came out at the end of the 19th century, about 1891. So I have to admit, this one actually made me hesitate when Jen told me that it was on offer, because like this one has been challenged specifically for racism and portrayal of Africans. It tells the story of a riverboat trip down or up the Congo. It never identifies the Congo. It never says it's the Congo. And the farther you get into the narrative, the more dreamlike and surreal it gets. And so it feels like either a trip into the depths of the human psyche or hell, which a lot of the symbolism that Conrad chooses really associates it with the Christian hell or the underworld. And so once you kind of get to the climax of the journey, like you really feel like you're in the depths of despair or the underworld. And so it is also a really strong indictment of the European colonial and imperial project in general. It's not nice to any of the characters, honestly. The European characters come off looking super bad too. So yeah, it has been challenged primarily on the racism, and especially because it was in a lot of high school classrooms. Like it was in a lot of high school curriculums in the middle of the 20th century. So by the 70s, it was very popular. And so a lot of post-colonial criticism has really taken that on. And so it's taught less commonly in classrooms. And so for me, the conversation around this one is very interesting about when are the really productive points to read it, and what kinds of support should be offered to students who are reading it.
I think that's actually a great segue into like supporting readers and offering them context. So let's hear a little bit more about that. I know, Michelle, that was a point that you wanted to make, but thank you for teeing that up so perfectly.
Yeah. I actually wondered if you did that by putting Heart of Darkness last. I was like, oh, huh, that's interesting.
Fits really well.
Yeah. Yeah, because the thing about Heart of Darkness is like because like all the portrayals of all the characters are really brutal. It can just be very off-putting, and a lot of the portrayals of the African characters, and I even hesitate to say characters because they aren't really given the like depth or humanity. They're very much like types and caricatures, except for like one or two that kind of stand out, like really interesting. Like um, there's there's a cannibal that works on the riverboat, and he almost he almost calls out one of the white characters on like his inhumanity, and so it's a really interesting point when you actually catch it, but without actually slowing down and stopping and thinking about the historical context of like this, like this is set at the end of the 19th century. We're really, really deep into colonialism, and like the British Empire is starting to see a lot of challenges from within. And Conrad himself, he had experience with multiple empires throughout his life. And so kind of stopping and thinking about like what is the context that this writer is coming from, and what is the historical context of like um, British and European contact with Africa at this point, and even in this particular case, the Belgium like contact with the Congo, and exploitation and all of that within the Congo. It's like it is very, very important to understand um, what Conrad is writing about, even though he never gives anything very specific names. Um, which is also and also it's just a brilliant piece of art, um which is also very hard when you're looking at like there are a lot of very racist like there are racial slurs in multiple places throughout it that even as I was editing it, I was having a little bit of trouble with. I was like, oh, okay, we're going to leave it in, but this is like you need to talk about what that means that the author is writing about these characters in this way.
Hmm. Well, Michelle, I was thinking about how you mentioned that in Frankenstein there was all this sort of political commentary that was sort of baked into it. Are you feeling like, can you speak a little bit about like that offering reader support and context in the any of the or books that you edited?
Yeah, and the ones that I edited, I think that, well, for me, just in general, I think that whenever you hand a text that was written in a different historical context and often also a different geographical context, even if it is within America, like, I mean, I think that the fact, I mean, Tom Sawyer, for instance, is extremely rooted in rural Missouri. Like it is a core part of what Mark Twain was trying to capture in that work. And so there's so many ways to kind of think about where is this coming from? What was the author experiencing when they were pulling this forward? And I think that if we hand students these books without giving them consideration of that context, it's like handing them a board and nails, but not letting them have a hammer and telling them to build something, right? They just don't have everything they need in order to do it. And then I think that we can hold that against them and be like, oh, they did such a shallow reading, or they didn't go in depth enough. And that's really a failure on our part as educators to not consider what gaps would need to be filled in order to allow for that deeper reading. And so I think that for all three of the books that I did, they are very of their time in that the characters are reacting to the social situations around them. And all of those social situations have parallels to the modern day. I think that all of them can feel very relevant and accessible to students as long as you just take a little bit of time to make those parallels clear. As long as you take a little bit of time to say,
Yep.
Mrs. Dalloway was feeling these pressures because this is what people would judge her for if she didn't do these things, right? Like, or this is the life that she gave up, and this is why she gave it up, because she didn't have access to this kind of education that wasn't allowed for her. And I don't think it takes that much. It doesn't have to be an entire other book worth of content in order to give them what they need to understand it. It could be you could do really in-depth historical context, but just giving a little bit of scaffolding to make sure that they have a point in can make these books so much more interesting and enjoyable and meaningful. And I think it's more responsible on our part when we make sure, especially with something like Heart of Darkness, as you were saying, Amanda, that they're not just reading it and being like, this is a horrible thing for him to say.
Yep.
Why would we ever read this? That you really kind of need that um understanding, even if they still disagree with it and take issue with it and say like, oh, I wish I hadn't read this, or oh, I don't think this should be on the school list. I want them to be able to speak to that from an informed position.
Mm. Um, so you each share that, reasons why these books were challenged in the past. Amanda, you brought up a point about like the different ways a single text can be challenged across its history. These books are all over 100 years old.
Yep.
In terms of, they were published over 100 years ago. So tell us more about that.
So that was really what I found the most fun as I was writing the annotations. And just thinking about how to like offer context with them, because with Frankenstein, I was really aware of some of the more recent criticisms of it, and that like that and it all of the readings that I have encountered recently, like there's a big celebration of it as like the first science fiction novel, and this focus on like hubris. And so that means that stuff like conversations around AI are really relevant right now. But then when you actually sit with the text, it's like, well, I really don't see it like engaging with just that. Um, and at the time that it came out, wait, Europe, again, to give some context, right? Europe was experiencing this weird backlash against revolutions. Not weird, I guess. I guess we know that backlashes happen. So at the end of the 18th century, we had the American Revolution, where the US colonies or the American colonies broke away from the British Empire. And then there was the French Revolution and the Haitian Revolution. And so like there were all of these attempts to like throw off the monarchies, and a bunch of like European governments were like, hold on a second, monarchies are just the natural way we do things here. Um, and Mary Shelley, her father was a political like theorist and a political writer, and then her husband was like super radical. And so she came from this like super liberal background, and you can see it throughout. Like she selects books for the creature to read when he's learning how to read that are really politically liberal and like anti-monarchist. So if you don't have the context, if you don't have that historical context, you wouldn't really be able to understand it, which I think is also especially important for understanding Victor Frankenstein's relationship with his creature, because slavery, like the master slave relationship, becomes a metaphor that is referenced throughout the book. Like the terms master and slave are used again and again as they're negotiating um, the weird relationship they have throughout the book. And so also keeping in mind that we're at the point where Europe is also dealing with slavery as an institution. And very soon after Frankenstein comes out, slavery is like there's the act to abolish slavery in the European, or not in the British Empire.
So that's amazing. That's really interesting. Michelle, there's so the overall context for this discussion today is that like, hey, book banning isn't new, book challenges aren't new. Like they've been doing this a long time. And I know you wanted to make a point about like the sort of the pros and cons of trying to apply lessons from older works to modern situations. Tell us more about that.
So I think one of the things that we have to grapple with, especially as educators making selections about what texts we can teach in a classroom, is just the finitude of our time, right? Like if I'm putting together a syllabus for a semester, realistically, I can probably fit for like the high school students that I teach 4 books in there if I'm going to really provide context for them, and we're going to write papers on them and we're going to read them closely. Like that's probably the max. And so every time I pick 4 books, I am not picking millions of other books, right? And so for me, I feel like one of the things that we really need to think about when we talk about is there value in these older texts and the context that they're bringing forward and the lessons that they're bringing forward, is that we need to remember that every time we're making one of these selections, there's an infinite number of other books that we are not putting into our syllabi, that we are not putting into our readers' hands. And so I do think that it's important to have a justification in mind for like, well, why this book? What are you going to get out of this book? And then also to try to find some bridges to connect that book to something that is, you know, written by, a lot of these books are written by white authors. A lot of these books are written by wealthy authors. A lot of these books are written by people who are in sort of the ruling class of whatever their society is, right? Or at least the professional class. And so I think that anytime we make those choices to let those voices speak, we also need to figure out how to build some bridges into our other selections that are going to help round out that just exposure to different ideas and different perspectives. And so I do think that when we are like, oh, all these great classics have all these wonderful lessons, we need to just remember that we have a much broader list to choose from just these books. And while these books are incredibly valuable, especially when read with context and when read in a way that we can really dive into them and understand how they bridge the gap in between these times. I mean, it's almost like reading Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, for instance, and then reading James by Percival Everett, it just makes you feel so connected to the history of all of these conversations. And I think that when we can do that for readers, when we can bring those connections forward, we're helping them see themselves as part of a larger whole, and that everything that is going on around them is historical and rooted in a context too. And I think that it helps them kind of make more sense of that.
Okay, so just to play the game, Amanda, what would you pair Frankenstein with? As
Oh my,
is there a modern book that you can think
oh,
of?
is there a modern book? Oh my gosh. I don't have one off the top of my head, but like there are lots that you could pair Frankenstein with. Like it's like I think it would also depend on who was reading it, like what level of class that I was doing it with. Um Man, I'm sorry, I'm
I didn't mean to
blanking.
stump you. I just was like the
Michelle, do you
James with
have an
the
idea?
I
Michelle's gonna.
I I think that Frankenstein would pair really well with the nonfiction book Fuzz by Mary Roach, which is all about what we do with animals when they break the law. So it's like a selection of essays that's like you know, like what do we do about killer bears? What do we do about the for instance, there was a example of the Vatican being overrun by rats, but they had taken like a vow to not kill things, but they were like, maybe we don't mean like, you know, it's kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We'll put out some rat traps. And I think that it would be a really interesting parallel to talk about like the limits of science and humans' interaction with nature and where we cross those lines.
That is a great pairing.
I like that. It's funny, most people talk about pairing and they're like, you know, what wine would you drink with this book? But I'm really like, I love this idea. Like, what contemporary book would you pair with one of these classics? I don't know why I put that in bunny ears quotes. They are classics, at least in the US, perceived as such. They've also been adapted a ton, right? Like,
Mhm.
I mean, I think almost all of these have had at least one movie, if not multiples. Amanda, I know you really wanted to talk about that between like adaptations and the original. Like, tell us more about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to what Michelle was saying about pairing like with books, like also like pairing some of the adaptations with these texts can give a lot of context, right? For example, Heart of Darkness is it's the basis for Apocalypse Now, which like takes the same idea as Heart of Darkness and puts it within the Vietnam War. And so then it's exploring sort of the American presence in Vietnam and like the horrors of the Vietnam War. Which is one of the things that like makes me like remembering that made me kind of stop and rethink some of my preconceptions about Heart of Darkness as I was working with it. Um, and so like these can also like make you like think about like how like what is like the actual like what is the ethical or moral kernel or maybe even just like the meat of this particular story. And then Frankenstein, I kind of wanted to bring it up because everybody knows Frankenstein as Frankenstein's monster, as like the Universal Pictures like monster. And Frankenstein really got big because it was adapted almost immediately into a stage play. And now like we've got how many movie adaptations of it. And like Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein
I was
and
just gonna, I was like, should I bring up Mel Brooks? But I was like, it is the, it is the joke that makes the point, right?
yeah, right. What I actually love about Young Frankenstein is that like so many people like who like haven't read Frankenstein or maybe were forced to read it in high school, which means that they didn't have the support they needed and didn't really understand what they were reading because Frankenstein has like I don't know, like Mary Shelley created an onion and you got to peel back the layers before you like actually get to anything. But I feel like it gets to the heart of the fact that Victor Frankenstein is like a really terrible person. He's an unreliable narrator. Like, sorry, Victor, but like after a while, I was like, are you even listening to yourself, dude? Um, and like the creature is such a sympathetic character, even though the creature might be an unreliable narrator as well. So, but most people, it's become a cultural touchstone, and so like Frankenstein's monster means something, and like, you know, like if I say like it's like they Frankensteined it, you immediately know what I'm talking about. Like somebody has taken a bunch of parts that don't go together and made something. Um, and so it continues to be this like through adaptations, it's become an important cultural touchstone, which at this point is pretty far removed from Mary Shelley's original work.
And that makes me think of the value of this entire project is so rooted in the fact that almost all of these are cultural touchstones, and yet most people don't have the context to understand what it's like we're interacting with like the pop culture distillation
Yeah.
of
Yep.
the thing and not the actual thing without really understanding what the thing was in the first place. It's like a bit of a hall of mirrors, right? Like we're interacting over here, but really the real thing is here, and you're helping both of you with by the sort of annotations and the editing and the way that you set this up. There are essays in the beginning of the books. You're really helping ground it and helping people see the reflection of the actual thing, which I think is really exciting. Um, sorry, go please.
Oh, I was just going to add to that. I think the place where that has happened the most to the ones that I have adapted is Tom Sawyer. I think about
Oh my gosh.
Tom Sawyer has just been turned into like the tiny little moments of mischief, right? It's the painting the fence white and tricking his friends into painting it for him, or showing up at his own funeral and surprising everybody. It's just these little like laughs. But that's, I mean, the book is so much deeper than that. The book is about this exploration of like, how do you find your moral center? How do you handle the pressure to be kind of this character that you've set yourself up as around your peers when you're actually feeling like you need to act differently for your own morality. And I think that like, I don't know if when I was a kid, the Jonathan Taylor Thomas version of like the Disney
Yes.
Tom Sawyer version came out. And I
Yes.
mean, it just has none of that, like none of the lesson or the morality. It's just like, hey, watch me get in trouble. Like,
Mhm.
um, and so I feel like that, like, we know Tom Sawyer as a mischievous character, but we don't remember or have ever even read. We've only read like little snippets of it. To you have to read like the whole thing and follow the arc in order to see what Twain is talking about in terms of morality and childhood and hypocrisy and how we navigate that.
So interesting. So part of what happens when books are challenged, especially to the extent that these books have been, but also what's happening now in terms of the sort of like flood attack, I would say, yeah, the weaponizing of book bans to create a chilling effect that really makes teachers and librarians afraid to bring in books with any diversity, is sort of there's sort of the problem of that kind of censorship, of soft censorship. They're never going to bring in the books at all. Of the censorship of like, take these books off the shelf, because I don't want my child to read it. And because of that, I don't think any child should be able to read it. Very problematic.
Yeah.
But there's also sort of self-censorship. And Amanda, you had shared that two of the texts were edited by the author to address criticism. Tell us a
Yep.
bit more about that.
Yeah. So like I'll start with Frankenstein, but I'll talk longer about Dorian Gray. So with Frankenstein, it's really interesting. There are two versions in circulation. There's the original 1818 version that was first published. Mary Shelley's name was not on it, probably to protect her family. But in 1831, much later in her life, she revised it really heavily. And the 1831 edition is what circulated for a good chunk of actually the time it's been in circulation. Um, and it's only been like much more recently that scholars pulled out or found the 1818 version, and now I'm seeing the 1818 version a lot, and that's actually the text that I selected for this, and then I included her introduction to the 1831. But she specifically chose in later in life to revise it so that it would be less radical, and so some of the politics is toned down a little bit. I mean, I still think it's pretty liberal for 19th century Europe, but yeah, so whether it's because she was older and was reflecting more, whether it's because her husband was dead and she was making the choices on her own rather than in collaboration, um, or whether it was because she had really like felt this criticism for a lot, she chose herself to revise it. Um, and then with Dorian Gray, I found
Sorry,
this one really.
before you
Go
go on to
ahead.
Dorian Gray, I wanted to press into that for just a
Yeah.
moment. When you were making the decision between the 1818 version and the 1831 version,
Mm-hmm.
um, given that most of the people, I don't know what you all envision as the audience, but like the
Yes.
fact that she wrote it as a teen
Mm-hmm.
is really exciting for a
Yeah.
teen to hear. I mean, it's exciting for me, and I'm not a teen, but like I think that's really exciting. So
Yeah.
if I was making the choice, I would have been like also much more leaning towards that. But can you just share what were the other considerations that helped you choose?
Um, so yeah, I think part of me, and it's really interesting too, because like I'm in my middle life now, so like maybe my initial thought should have been, oh, well, she was older and wiser, and so clearly like I should do the last version because, but too often I think that editors go, oh, the last version is the correct version. And I don't think that's always the case. And so for me, the fact that the 1818 version, she was younger when she wrote it, um, it gave more to be challenged. I think that that's more exciting. And I think that it's more interesting to kind of to have, and for this project too, I thought that it would be more interesting to have that version be the version and then just give her later introduction for context. Especially because it's super easy to find the 1831 text. Like it's out there in a lot of editions. So that
I
was
like the
real,
idea that you did the version that she really wanted to put out in the world, right?
yeah,
Not from the noise that she got from that version.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
That's
that's
cool.
what I was thinking, right? Like you were saying, oh, maybe the latest version is the best version, but that's the version that is in conversation with readers more, where I feel like there's
yeah,
something, you know, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's an improvement either. It means that it had
right,
this other layer of influence.
yeah,
So
exactly.
Joseph Conrad also revised Heart of Darkness?
No, it was Oscar Wilde revised
Oh,
Dorian
Oscar Wilde.
Gray.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes.
Six
So like
books, it's hard to keep
I
track.
know. So Dorian Gray was interesting because his editor first made a lot of revisions before they published the first version, which was a shorter kind of like novella length that was published in a magazine. Um, but after that received a lot of criticism for being basically too gay, um, then Wilde, when he expanded it, he also tried to tone down the gay, I guess, because when it was used against him in court, it was excerpts from the magazine version, not the novel version, which I did the novel version just because it was longer, and I thought everybody deserved to see the expanded version, and they were also like within a year of each other. So I did note the sections that had been edited, but that he had revised, but were used in court against him. So like I noted that this section had been heavily revised, but it was used to
Did he
prove
revise
gross
it before the court case or after?
before. Yeah, it was because it was after Dorian Gray came out that he was publicly accused of sodomy by his lover's father. Um, the Marquis of Queensberry. And all of his friends were like, listen, dude, do not just ignore him. Don't do anything. And he's like, no, I think I'm going to sue him for libel. And they're like, they're going to prove sodomy against you. Don't sue him. And his friends were right. And then he lived in exile for the rest of his life.
Oh.
Well,
Yeah.
and did hard labor, and
Yeah.
which destroyed his health. Yeah, it was not
Yeah.
a pretty picture.
It was not a pretty picture. But yeah, it was like the novel was out, and everybody was like, "This is there's stuff in here that we don't know if it like this is maybe a little obscene." Which looking back now, like our standards are clearly different. I don't think a lot of people would pick it all up without the support.
Hmm. So what, informed by, you both just did 3 really deep dives into these classic pieces of literature and how they were challenged. And I'm wondering, how has that shaped your perspective on all the book challenges and banning that's happening today in 2025?
I feel very strongly that nobody should be able to mount a attack on a book that they have not read. And I feel like that is mostly what is happening. I feel like a lot of books are being challenged and banned for snippets that are taken maybe out of context, maybe not, but I don't think the people who are using them know. And I also feel like if I think that if you were going to ban a book, I think you should have to go through and annotate it and pull out like each piece and explain it in
Yeah.
context why you think
Mhm.
that it is doing whatever it is you think that it's doing that it shouldn't do. And
Yep.
I also would just say that I find it incredibly insulting to young readers to think that they cannot hold an idea in their mind that they won't agree with, right? Like, I think that our readers are a lot smarter than that. I don't think that they are going to believe something just because they read it. I think that they are smart enough to think for themselves and to be critical about problematic parts of books. Because I will say, like, there were definitely some anti-Jewish passages in The Great Gatsby that I was cringing through as I was annotating them. I was like, I cannot put this in a context that makes it okay. Like, this is just straight up bigotry. But I trust my readers to be able to read that and be like, okay, yeah, this is a view that this author had. That's a problem, but I can still read the rest of this novel. And I think that young readers are capable of that.
Yeah, and I think that there's a difference between being aware of like something that's a problem and sanitizing something, right? Like I think there's a difference between being able to critically engage with a book and go, man, it is really a problem that like Fitzgerald included like anti-Semitic sections in this book, and maybe we need to talk about why that's not good, versus let's just cover over all of the blemishes. That's not an
Yeah,
interesting world.
or an authentic one, right? Like
Yeah.
if you sanitize it, then people don't understand that it was problematic, and that was the context, and like it's part of the sort of sanitization of history also,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, like I'm gonna bring up a book that isn't that isn't one of these books, but like the the school district where I went to high school, like they recently in like the last year and a half challenged a Toni Morrison novel. Um, and when that news got back to me, I was like, what what like what do you mean you're challenging a Toni Morrison novel? Um, and to Michelle's point, the person who challenged it in front of the school board didn't even know that Toni Morrison was a woman. Um, and which like floored me. But again, like it's just like they were trying to like paint over and trying like only we can only share pretty like safe things with our students. And I'm like, no, we have to be able to, with support, engage with the uncomfortable parts of our history.
And
Yeah.
I would just add to that that a lot of these conversations are so disrespectful to educators and suggesting that educators don't have learners' best interest in mind,
Hmm.
that educators are not making selections with thoughtful consideration of how it's going to impact their learners and how they're going to talk about it. And I feel like it's it's part of a larger just like distrust of expertise and a larger rejection of um people's training and experiences. And like as an educator, I put so much thought into which books I select for my learners to read, and I don't do it lightly, and I know that it's a big responsibility. And I'm working in a situation where like the parents are usually directly choosing me as the educator for their homeschooled children, and I recognize the trust that's put into me to do that.
Hmm.
And so I think other educators are doing that same work and deserve some trust and some leeway to do their jobs.
Yes. Okay, we have just a few minutes left. I have just I want to give each of us the opportunity to talk about, like, is there one or two things that people watching this that you would recommend that they can do to help fight for the freedom to read?
Get your library card.
Besides buying.
So I would say get your library card. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. I think we had a little lag.
All right, get your library card, Michelle. Amanda?
Buy challenged books. Like, buy them and donate them to your library if you don't want to like have a lot of books in your house, which I don't know why anybody wouldn't, but yeah.
Yeah, and also there are a lot of nonprofits that are trying to help distribute books,
Hmm.
and that's a good segue to We Are Stronger Than Censorship. So the shirt I am wearing, Strong Like a Reader, our logo, it has the circle, the O, which is a do not enter sign with that's opening up to reveal it's a book being read. And so we have the swag, and so every shirt like this one. We also have Strong Like a Teacher and Stronger Like a Librarian and Stronger Like an Author. We have a ton of different kinds. But every shirt it includes a $16 donation to buy 2 books to offset 1 book challenge. And that's how we're scaling up. I don't know if I said it earlier. This is the second one I've recorded today, but we have offset 1,250 book challenges with buying and donating 2,500 books. So you can donate to the program. You can get a shirt. You can also, you'll see a page in the back of each of these 6 editions that explains a little bit more about We Are Stronger Than Censorship, and includes a little QR code if you want to donate or get some swag. So it's actually a lovely little partnership. I really want to thank Michelle and Amanda. I feel like I want to read all 6 of these again, but your annotated versions, because I didn't know so much of that. I also want to thank Every Library Institute for the opportunity, for giving us this space and this platform to honor Banned Books Week, not celebrate Banned Books Week, but to honor it and to celebrate the freedom to read. So I'm going to turn off the recording. Thank you all so much for watching. Any final thoughts before I turn off the recording? Michelle?
Just thank you all so much. I hope that you'll go read some banned books.
Amanda?
Yeah. Yeah, it was a pleasure to be here. And I mean, make sure that you're making time to read.
All right. Thanks, everybody.